So the unweighted RFP is a waste of time, in my opinion. So I graduated kindergarten in '87 and got into this business, back then. So that's how long I've been in the business.
The movie Talladega Nights, where he's like, "Don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby."
Yeah.
I was sitting next to this one lady who was like, "We just signed up with this vendor. I think they're going to be great for us." But then you hear the conversation at the other table, and they're like, "I can't wait to leave this vendor.
Sure.
They're terrible for us." Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Joey's HR Lounge, where HR leaders think out loud. I'm your host, Joey Price, founder of Jumpstart HR, and we've got a very special guest with us here at Prism Live, because we are special guests here at Prism Live. Rick Torrence, Chief Sales Officer. Now, this whole conference is all about Prism and the ecosystem. But I want to start with your hot take, because I ask every guest on the show, what's your HR hot take?
Yeah. Thanks, Joey. And thank you very much for being here. And thanks for letting me share my thoughts. My hot take would be this, is that our customer, the Prism customer, services the small business of America, right? That anywhere from the micro company to, companies that are 200, 300, 400, right? The flavor of our customer is called a PEO. And not enough small businesses know about PEOs and the value they bring in the HR category, and how much burden they can take off the small business by working directly with PEOs. So that would be my hot take, is that the small business needs to become familiar, and we need to do a much better job of educating the small business on what a PEO is and how the value of the PEO extends to them.
Great. Well, I hope we get to cover that during our time today, because one of the reasons why I wanted to do a live podcast here at Prism HR Live is because you all are so unique. What we see is a strong play for HR buyers to benefit from a partner ecosystem. But at Prism, that's kind of the bread and butter. It's the hub. Even with Shay and I walking around and talking to some of the folks who are vendors in the expo hall here, which has been very positive reaction, by the way, from the expo vendors. Um, they're here because they want to talk to the PEO leaders.
Yes.
And so you are like the bridge to the customer, or the software to help customers succeed and help the PEOs grow and scale. But for those who are not familiar with the PEO model, what is it?
That's a great question. So PEO, first of all, the acronym is Professional Employer Organization. And it takes advantage of compliance that allows the small business employee to become the employee of record for the PEO. And in doing that, the small business is able to take advantage of scale and of literally purchasing power at scale for things like benefits, things like retirement, things like, all kinds of insurances and services that, left alone, if they're trying to consume that at their level, it's very expensive. And so the PEO spreads that across their entire customer base and affords them opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't have. And I started a small business many years ago, and literally trying to get retirement plans for 10 employees was a huge challenge and a huge expense. The PEO model changes that game completely. The other thing it does is it takes the burden of the small employer from understanding all the rules and compliance and regulation that is risk to them. It removes the risk. And so, when the PEO enters their world, it's a huge benefit to them. And it lets them focus on what they're there to do, which is grow their small business. If you're worried about paying my people and their benefits and their retirement, it takes away from your ability to focus on building your business.
Yeah.
So that's what a PEO in nature does. And then again, Prism supports that PEO through our technology and services.
Yeah, and PEOs aren't a new concept, but I think they're a part of this digital transformation that we're all in. So, you've been in the business for quite some time. I'll let you share how long it's been, and you've seen
Yeah.
and you've worked at other companies. What's the red thread of PEOs today and PEOs of yesterday? Like,
Great
what
question.
what's stayed the same, but also what's different?
Yeah. Love the question. So I graduated kindergarten in '87 and got into this business, back then. So that's how long I've been in the business.
Yeah.
But so so first of all, the common thing is literally understanding APEO. It, People didn't understand it 20 years ago, and they're still trying to understand it today because it is compliance, and there are the federal government and states have a law that allows for co-employment. Okay, and co-employment, simply put, is that the same employee can work for, you literally can take that employee that is working for you, but I'm going to employ them, and and literally take care of all the HR for them. And it's misunderstood. It just isn't a well understood. The laws around it aren't well understood. Wasn't well understood 20 years ago, and it still needs to be better understood today. So that's the
Okay.
commonality
Okay.
of it.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah.
Well, what's new? What's new with AI, with how small businesses are evaluating PEOs and CPOs in the market? What would you say is fresh and new?
Well, there's so much. So the concept of a PEO, and again, PEO is a segment, it's one of our segments. So it's one of our biggest segments that we service. So that segment, for years, the PEO said, I want to do everything for you because that creates the value for the small business. And so much so that I don't even want to afford you certain technologies because I don't want you to think that the technology is the value. I want you to think that I'm the value. And in recent years, there's been a transformation in the PEO mindset to leverage technology as the value, right? And so if you think about all of us today, and just even your setup is amazing.
Thank you.
You have, you're leveraging technology, and to its fullest potential. We all have our phones either on us or near us,
Yeah.
and we do that every single day of our lives. And we have become accustomed to consuming tech as the first level of quality service. Right? I would argue that most of us today don't want to engage with a human being to solve our problem. If tech can solve it before we ever engage the human being. And so the PEO used to shy away from that. They're starting to embrace that. And we see that in self-service. Like, self-service concepts aren't new, but distributing them to the employee level and the small business level is something that PEOs are now moving to at a much, much more rapid pace. And AI even makes that even more prevalent.
Yep.
Right? AI is transformation. It is already transformational. It is going to speed up, what we do with tech and how we leverage technology across, whether you're an employee, whether you're the employer, or whether you're a service provider, a technology provider like us.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't have a workforce conversation these days without technology. And part of the workforce conversation is buying that technology. Now, we have a framework at Jumpstart HR. It's called Bridge, and that's how we help HR technology buyers understand how to evaluate solution providers. Now, the acronym starts with B, which is basically to understand the business problem. Now, you're a chief sales officer. You've probably sat in on a ton of deals, heard a ton of opportunities from your team. How often would you say your prospects are starting with the business problem? And if they're not, what's the coaching that you give them to surface that?
Excellent framework. The definition is the business problem. What is the business problem? Right? And in those words, it has to be the business's problem, not an individual in some tactical solution to make their job better. The business has to feel the pain. And the business leaders have to understand the pain, because without a clear definition of that business problem that impacts the business, change won't occur.
Yeah.
Change isn't going to occur because I can shave, 30 minutes off of what I do for a living every day. It will not occur for that.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're not going to fire me. You're not going to go, you're like the 30 minutes. If you save it, so what?
Yeah.
Right? So it has to be a problem, and that definition has to be clear and acknowledged by the senior most person in their organization, and recognize that we need to change this. And a lot of companies, when they start their buying process, start at the very tactical level. Well, we want to fix this. This person's spending more time to do this. We need a little bit better reporting over here. But that's not a definition of the business problem. And so I think, for the business to really sit down, get a very clear understanding of what they're trying to solve for that is impactful to the organization is critical. And and honestly, as a sales leader, that's the first question I ask my sales team: define why they're going to change.
Yeah.
And the minute I hear something technical, I go, move on to your next deal, because that one's not going to sell. Right? And so it has to be, as you pointed out, clear definition of a business's problem.
Yeah. And for you listening or viewing this, that business problem is not just HR's problem, right? You can probably speak to what our research shows is that more and more of the HR buying conversations, it's the CEO, CTO, CIO, it's everyone who's involved in making work. And so it's not just gone are the days where CEO tasks HR to go find 5 vendors and pick the best one and let me sit with the final one and see if I like him. Or I went golfing with this guy and he gave me his card and
Right.
he treated me to a nice steak dinner afterwards. I think we're gonna go with them sight unseen. You really have to be thoughtful from the beginning of the sales journey or the buying journey, because that's, to your point, you're talking about going on to the next deal if the person hasn't identified what that challenge is.
Yeah.
And what I would add to that is it's a holistic conversation that has to happen, not just within the HR department, but across the organization.
I couldn't agree more. And I think every part of organizations, whether you're in HR, whether you're finance, whether you're in some piece of the operation of your business, you have challenges you face every day. Right? And when the business changes an HRIS system, it's because it's impacting all of those people, all of those elements of the business. It isn't because it impacts just HR. And I would argue that we probably haven't sold many deals where all it ever did was impact HR. It's got to impact the greater part of the business.
That's right.
For change.
That's right. Well, a lot of buying is done through the formal RFP process. Love it or hate it, that's the structured way for us to evaluate the buying process. Where do you see buyers struggling to separate must-haves from nice-to-haves? And how does a weak or unweighted set of criteria show up later as a stalled or regretted purchase?
Yeah. So there's some great insight to that. So the unweighted RFP is a waste of time, in my opinion.
Why is that?
Because
now, this might be your hot take, by the way.
It could be. Because of this.
Uh-huh.
The business doesn't know what its priorities are.
Ah, that's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you can't wait, like it's okay to have 100 criteria in an RFP. I need to have all these boxes checked in order for a change to make sense to me. But nobody does everything perfect. And if I don't weight the importance of each one of those to some degree of weighting, then how will I ever know who fits best? What happens then is it becomes a game of who do you like best? Who treated me best? Who and it doesn't you could be making a decision that you think is the best decision you've ever made, and you ended up with a solution that never meets your need.
Yeah.
Right? Because you didn't weight your criteria, you might, you might have a workforce management solution that doesn't meet the core business need, but because you didn't weigh it appropriately against other needs, you're willing, and that could cripple you. So it's got to be weighted, in my opinion. And if it's not fully weighted across all criteria, you better have really clear, defined selection criteria.
Yeah.
Right? Which is another way to sort of get to weighted, but I like weighted better.
Yeah.
But your selection criteria has to be weighted in itself. Money falls in here on the selection criteria. Capability falls here on the selection criteria. Proof of concept falls here on the selection criteria. And if you can do that, that can also solve that problem. But there's nothing like getting an RFP with that the potential customer is rating and weighting. Then if you become part of that true evaluation process. The way I look at it, Joey, is this: you're not really being evaluated to get past the RFP, right? And so to get
They're
to
being
that,
filtered or
yes,
passing
100%.
the gatekeepers. Yeah.
Yes, sir. That is exactly right.
Yep.
So again, it's hugely important, at least from my view, that if you're a buyer, you weight your criteria and you've got clearly defined decision criteria on what solution is going to meet your needs.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, I sometimes joke every salesperson wants to make the president's club, right? So if you're weighing a buying decision on the way you were treated, which is always important. Customer service is always important. But that can't be the primary Joe called me back first, or Mary sent me, a gift card, or I had I sat in this demo and I got this reward. Those things are nice. They're great. They're important. But the success of your deals are going to land on that weighted criterion.
100%. I'll add one thing. The success of the future with that customer is impacted by that.
Yeah.
Because if the customer does a great job of waiting, if the customer really understands its needs, if the customer uses that RFP and that selection criteria to pick the right solution, then they're going to be happy for a long time.
Yeah.
If they don't, they're going to make a decision that they're either going to have to live with, which nobody wants, or they're going to be forced with change way faster than they want, which nobody wants either.
Yeah.
And depending on the scope of it, you go make a mistake like that when you're responsible for a 10,000 person company, you're probably not there the next day.
Yeah.
Right? You scale down, that does, that seriousness of it doesn't, but it's important to make those right decisions.
Rick, what breaks my heart, I was in a room of CHROs, HR leaders of 1,000 plus employee organizations a few days ago. It was a dinner, and it was a dinner sponsored by a vendor, but people were so candid about every other vendor except that one. And so what it showed me was HR knows like when they're being lied to, when they're being disappointed. And the part that really broke my heart was I was sitting next to this one lady who was like, we just signed up with this vendor. I think they're going to be great for us. But then you hear the conversation at the other table and they're like, I can't wait to leave this vendor.
Sure.
They're terrible for us. And I don't know the buying process that firm went through. But I've got to think that if they went through the weighted process, if they maybe had more structure to it, they would have been more successful. But there's also another component too. It's the buying process, but it's also the people around the table. Right? Are they aligned on priorities, and are they aligned on what are really the strategic goals, which I think feeds into why you want to have that weighted ranking, but could you talk about the pressures of different folks in the buying
Sure.
committee?
Yeah. So it's interesting. You bring up a very interesting point, is that there is a lot of stress in a buying process, right? And the core of it is getting it right, right? The stress is I got to get it right, but you got to get it right, and it's tough to meet everybody's need
Yeah.
in a selection criteria, particularly around something as complex or as large or as impactful as an HCM platform, because an HCM platform touches every single employee,
Yep.
right? And so you do have to align in it. You have to align on, we'll go back to your first question. You have to align on what's the business problem we're solving? And then where does it impact each part of the organization? And is that part of the organization aligned on the change? Who is the influencer in that part of the organization, et cetera? So I think it's critical that the organization work hard to get that, and have an agreement with all those people up front.
Yeah.
And that's where the stress happens, is when it's not agreed upon. And I will add that I don't know that because a lot of organizations don't go through these buying processes frequently, they don't know how to do this.
Because it's a muscle.
It is a muscle.
It's a muscle. If you don't use it, it's weaker. Yeah.
And if you're, so there's lots of ways to solve for that, right?
Yeah.
It's go like literally go hire the talent, the external subject matter experts to help you in this process, right? And it's not shifting responsibility. It's just knowing that they're going to help you ask all the right questions and do the alignment. And it's also rely on some of the parties that you're going to evaluate to help you. Some of the smartest buyers have asked some very simple questions. What am I not asking you that I should be?
Yeah.
Right. It's if you put thought to that question, if you're the potential vendor, if you actually give thought and a thoughtful answer to that question, it's hugely helpful to the buyer. But you have to be thoughtful. You have to be honest about it. But it's a great question of people that you're evaluating.
Yeah. I'd agree. I'd agree. I think we hear that in the interview process sometimes when folks are joining a team and they want to know about the culture of an organization, and they're like, what should I have asked that I didn't ask?
100%.
So that practical tip, works everywhere. Well, let's say that a team has done the due diligence, they're aligned on priorities, they understand the business problem, and they've ranked and weighted and triage needs, but they struggle with the execution. Where do you think organizations miss the mark on evaluating their ability to execute on the right tool? Because there's the movie Talladega Nights, where he's like, don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a great line. Great movie.
Yeah. If there's execution challenge, it's not always the vendor's challenge, right? So what gems of wisdom could you share to a buyer out there, somebody who's in the RFP process, who's like, before we make that decision, let's make sure we got the right drivers in place to make sure that we carry this out successfully?
Yes, I think somebody use some structure that's pretty well known, but is often overlooked. That you have to define resource involvement and all the roles that need to be involved. You have to define your time criteria, right? And what do you need done by when, and how long should this go, right? You have to look for blockers. A blocker could be, one of my resource criteria has a planned leave of absence, right? And so too many buyers focus specifically on the selection. They don't look internally and say, hey, once we select, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Right. And being ready to go is a very important aspect. Now, again, the potential solution provider vendor should be able to create some framework around that. You need to have a project manager, and they are going to need to dedicate X amount of time on this project. And you need to hear the truth of that, not, you got to be careful you don't get what you want to hear. You got to get what is really. And so questions like, tell me what the roles that we need to have are. What's the average? If you think about all across your customer base and all the implementations you've done, because you've done way more than we have, what's the average time that project manager would spend on an implementation, including the products that we're purchasing?
Yeah.
Right? Get metrics like that.
Yeah.
So then you can measure those against, what you can ask of your team. And if there's a gap, don't do anything until you figure out how to solve for that gap, because the gap doesn't go away.
Nope.
Right. And so that's just an example of what, they need to focus on.
Sometimes buyers feel like they're bothering the solution provider, but I look at it differently. I'm like, if you tell me what questions you have, I understand what your priorities are and how we can position our solution to honestly help you execute on that challenge that you have. So I think that practitioners need to be asking more questions. Buyers need to be asking more questions.
Couldn't agree more. And we see this a lot in evaluations. They spend all their time and energy on the tech or the solution itself.
Mhm.
They don't ask nearly enough questions on how do we get this thing functional to the degree that solves our
Yes.
business problem.
Yes.
Right.
In the environment that we're in,
Yeah.
the resources that we have.
100%.
Yeah.
And I tell, in the day when I was selling, and I tell our sales reps this today too, that don't tell me we didn't have a full-on services conversation with these folks where you engaged our service leaders in the pre-sale conversation. Because first of all, our service leaders, their jobs are to execute, right? They're not going to say anything at 8:00 that they can't deliver at 5:00, right? So have them involved in the process. That ensures that the potential customer is hearing what they need to be involved in and participate in. And that's critical. So, it does none of us. It doesn't do the potential new client, and it doesn't do us any good to spend all this energy and selection and then in an implementation and only for it to fail because the company that is selecting us didn't really understand what was required of them. We all fail. We all lose if that happens.
Yeah.
And so it's a critical piece of it.
Okay. Two quick thoughts, lightning round thoughts. What is one key to success for a successful long-term relationship with a vendor? So you've narrowed it down to your 3 to 5 choices, and I'm looking for that gem of like, you've made the right call if you ask this question or you hear this from a vendor. And then the last thing, we haven't even talked about AI. So
sure.
In 2-3
so I'll give you the
years
quick one
now,
and I think we might have chatted about this stress test.
Yeah.
There has to be a form of a stress test. They come in many shapes, many sizes, many ways. But just because you selected somebody, how do you know? How do you absolutely know that it's going to work for you? There's no such thing as absolute. You're never going to absolutely 100% know. But there are ways to go find out. And in another segment, we can talk about those ways. But I'll give you one.
Okay.
If you're going to ask for customer referrals, schedule an hour to an hour and a half with each one of them. Have very thoughtful, planned out questions that are aligned with what your business objective is once you've implemented this. Does it do this? Does it do this? Will it get me here? What's your experience here? Do not go into it about, hey, tell me about them. Or do you like what you're doing with them? There's way too much of that that goes on. If you're going to stress test with referrals and references, make sure that it's really thoughtfully planned out with really good questions. Share those questions ahead of time and keep the solution provider out of the middle. Don't let us in the middle of it. Let that happen organically and naturally, but go into it very
Yeah.
thoughtfully.